So this really interesting thing's been happening over the past few days where there's been this kind of crossover of two different sort of debates or issues that I've been having with people. And God showed me something really important through it. And I'd love to know whether you guys have thought along the same lines or anything. Anyway, you probably already know that I've been having discussions with people on a different channel about the Hebrew roots movement and Torah observance and the implications of that. And it all kind of got clarified for me yesterday when I told one person that I said, we don't serve the same God. They believe the Holy Spirit is a power, not a person, that he's not intelligent, doesn't make decisions, even though I believe that's in direct contradiction to what the word said. And then within a few hours, I was having another conversation with another friend about a completely different issue. But it was about a really big church that's a charismatic church that she had visited recently. And that church, we discovered, believes that Christ was just a man, not God. That he had no divinity, that he was only human, and ergo we can all be like him. That one just gives me... Anyway, I had always thought for the longest time that the issue of the Trinity and whether it existed was not a salvation issue. And I think from the standpoint of somebody who's searching for truth, like we all go through a journey, even on the foundational issues, right? So even on things that aren't as complicated or aren't as mysterious, or that are more specifically addressed in the Bible, we often have to take some time to wrestle with it and learn and go through a process with God. And I think anybody who's in that place about the Trinity is going to be fine, because they're going to, if they're seeking truth and not just trying to make it fit to their way of thinking, they're gonna find the truth, which is that somehow God manages to exist in three separate persons who are one person. And we don't understand that, and we really can't get our heads around that, but we can trust it and we can be sure that it's there. It is a belief that, as a general rule, I think people don't come to or understand right away. I think it's something that, because, to one hand, it requires a little bit of to prove it requires going back to original languages. Genesis 1 is the perfect example. It's the opening of the Bible, and as God is introduced, he's referred to as both singular and as plural in the same context. And in fact, the original language word for him is what they call a uniplural, which is one who is more than one. So I believe it is actually expressly stated in the Bible. It's just that our language is very limited about that. So I think in English-speaking faith, people won't necessarily find that truth right away. But anybody who wants the real truth, I think they'll get there. But what's been happening in these two discussions that I've been having from people that are in belief systems that appear to be almost polar opposites, they both appear to have taken the Bible or from the Bible, yet one is almost exclusively Holy Spirit driven. There's basically very little reference or time or attention given to anybody else in the Godhead. And the other has gone so far back to a limited understanding of God and who he is that they've focused on the law and God the Father and kind of I think, diluted Christ and the Holy Spirit. But what God just made me it kind of smacked me over the head that in both cases, they don't know the God that I know. They are worshiping a different God than me. And I wasn't thinking of it that way. I was thinking that they had it wrong about my God. But I think the reason they are so driven and so convinced and so certain in their ways is because they are experiencing a God. It's just not the same one I am. So of course they believe what they're experiencing because it's tangible to them. They are, of course, not above finding out the truth that I know. And I'm sure at least one of those groups would say that I'm the one following a false spirit, if not both of them. I'm sure they would turn any implication that I take in this right on back on me. But I guess what I'm stumbling around about is I didn't think the Trinity was a salvation issue. I thought it was one of those theologies that you needed some time to get to, and eventually you'd get there. And I think for some people that's true. But I think what God's been trying to press on me the last couple days is that who he is, how he exists, how those forms interact with us, that is crucial to knowing him. And if you don't know or don't understand one of those forms, you're actually worshiping a different God. And that's a huge statement to make. And I know that, but I'm also so confident that it's true. So I want to be really clear. If you believe that Jesus was just a human being, that he wasn't God also, like fully God, if you already think you've studied through that and that you already know the truth and the conclusion that you've come to is that Jesus was just a man, you are not worshiping the God that I worship. You are not serving the God that I serve, and you are finding something in the Bible that to me does not exist. If your contention is with the Holy Spirit and you think the Holy Spirit is just a power and not a person, I'd really encourage you to study the passages on spiritual gifts, because we're told in there that the Holy Spirit is the one to will and to choose which spiritual gifts we receive. And a force, a non-moral, non-sentient, unintelligent force can't make decisions. It's just power. It's just strength. It's not a person. So it doesn't have the capacity to make a decision. But the word is very clear that the Holy Spirit makes decisions about us, and also that the Spirit teaches us, and that the Spirit advocates for us. Again, these aren't things that a power can do. These are personal interactions. So I think with the spirit issue, there's probably, I think it's easier to be deceived and still know the truth. Like, I think if you know Christ properly, you might get messed up on the spirit, but you'll get there eventually. But I think if you've gone from a position of having had the truth about Christ and the Holy Spirit before, and you've been drawn back into the old covenant, the old law, basically the diluting of the Holy Spirit and Christ's perfect sacrifice. I think it's a salvation issue. I think you don't know the God that I know. And I want to say that not as a judgment, but as a warning. You need to meet him, because he's incredible. And the stuff that you're getting mixed up on, it has no value. It has no eternal value. And if you meet him, you'll be so glad that you did. But until then, I'm no longer going to be arguing that our God says or does something. I've learned now. You worship someone else that I don't worship. So I'm going to have these discussions from that basis. I'd love to know what you guys' experience has been and what you think about that. Let me know.